I'm Christy Bishop, and welcome to What Nobody Tells Us. Today's topic is one that I knew next to nothing about. I had heard of it, and if I was in a trivia contest and had to describe what it was or define it or who it happens to or the symptoms or the risk factors or any of those things, I would have gotten 99% of it wrong. And that topic is preeclampsia. Preeclampsia is a high blood pressure disorder that can come on very, very quickly with pregnant women. It impacts particularly first-time moms. And my guest today is named Sheridan Taylor Donahue. And Sheridan and I have known each other for over 10 years. We used to work together, and she is a first-time mom. Now, Sheridan had no idea that she had preeclampsia. She actually started following during her pregnancy. She started following an Instagram account, which I'll put in the show notes. It's at Mackenzie on Motherhood. And she randomly saw, if you should maybe just think about, there's this thing called preeclampsia. And if you have this symptom and this symptom and this symptom and this symptom, you may want to get your blood pressure checked. Well, I'm not going to spoil the entire surprise or the entire interview, but it turns out Sheridan basically self-diagnosed preeclampsia and was essentially turned away from her OB, telling her it was not really a big deal. Now, my OB, when I was pregnant with Tessa, almost 7 years ago, her birthday is this month, she never mentioned preeclampsia to me, and my blood pressure was always perfectly fine. I was very lucky to have a perfectly healthy pregnancy, perfectly healthy delivery. Like, it was textbook. I know I'm not the norm at all, but nobody mentioned preeclampsia to me. Nobody mentioned preeclampsia to Sheridan either. And this is not an uncommon practice. Now, the more that I looked into this and the more that Sheridan and I talked about it, I realized this is an epidemic. And it's not just an epidemic amongst young first-time mom. In particular, it's an epidemic amongst Black women. And Sheridan talks more about that in the episode. There's an article that I'll also link to in the show notes in Time magazine from June of this year, just a few months ago, by Allison Felix. She's the most decorated U.S. track and field athlete of all time. We've all heard of Allison Felix. And she talks about her track and field teammate, Tori Bowie, who was found dead in her home in Florida on May 2nd of this year from complications related to childbirth and preeclampsia. Now, Tori was an Olympic athlete who was young, in incredible shape. Now, Allison was interviewed about Tori and essentially making sure that her legacy is not lost and that her passing is not in vain. But it's not just Tori. This is an epidemic amongst Black women. Serena Williams, the most decorated and perhaps the most famous female tennis athlete of all time, had near-death complications during her pregnancy. Beyonce developed preeclampsia. I don't know about it. Sheridan had to self-diagnose, didn't know about it. Sheridan shared her story and is starting to become an advocate for preeclampsia. Her just sharing her story actually saved her sister-in-law, who went out and got a blood pressure monitor, and she realized she had preeclampsia and no one told her. So this is absolutely wild. And you want to talk about what nobody tells us? Nobody tells us about preeclampsia. So if you are out there and you are pregnant, if this is your first pregnancy, if you had or have a parent who had a blood clot disorder, if you've never heard of any of these things, this is something to educate yourself on. Most likely, if you're being monitored regularly by your OB, you're fine. They're all over it. But there are OBs who are not all over it. And there are OBs who don't tell you anything about this deadly disorder. Now, Sheridan details her whole story so beautifully. And again, she has a beautiful, healthy baby. She is healthy at the end of this, but she's still seeking answers about why this happened to her and what she can do, if anything at all, to avoid this or mitigate this, should she and her husband, Kevin, want to get pregnant again in the future. So I really think this is a wildly informative episode overall, and I hope it helps you, or send it to a friend who's pregnant. Just hey, you know what? Have you checked into this just in case? Because preeclampsia comes on fast. It is often without too much warning, and if you confuse the symptoms with just regular pregnancy symptoms of a headache and swollen feet and a little bit of weight gain, you can be in for dire results. And I want to help anyone avoid that. Sheridan wants to help anyone avoid that. And God knows if Olympic athletes are dying of this spares no one. So I feel very passionately about this, having just learned about it, and I hope that you learn a lot, and again can share, and we can help get the word out about what preeclampsia is doing to young mothers of our generation. Okay, stepping off my soapbox. I'll calm down now. Without further ado, here's my conversation with the amazing Sheridan Donahue about preeclampsia. Hi, Sheridan. I'm so happy to see you.
So good to see you. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining What Nobody Tells Us. You have a wild story, but we're going to get into it. But before we do, for people who are listening and have no idea, they're like, oh, I've maybe heard of preeclampsia, but I'm not sure what it is. Can you give a description of what preeclampsia actually is?
Yeah, and what you just said is exactly right. It's one of those things that you hear about and you're like, that'll never happen to me. I have no idea what it is. I'm not going to look it up because it's just something that you don't think is ever going to happen to you. But basically, preeclampsia is when you're pregnant and you have really high blood pressure, and that can lead to a stroke or a heart attack. So it's pretty simple, but it's really complex at the same time because they really don't know what causes it, how to prevent it. So it's really just kind of like an unknown disease. But basically, the pre part is eventually turns into eclampsia, which is a stroke. So yeah, it's just high blood pressure when you're pregnant, and it can get really severe. It could be pretty mild. It can happen anytime after 20 weeks, which is usually like the big like midway point in a pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's what it is.
So, eclampsia is a stroke. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So preeclampsia is
Pre-stroke.
before a stroke. Okay. And the high blood pressure leads to a stroke.
Exactly.
Okay. Oh, interesting. And so if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm 31.
You're 31 and you're a first-time mom.
Yes.
And in no world, you're a very healthy person. You
Yeah.
work out, you come from a healthy family. Like there's not a world where you should be at risk for a stroke in a normal situation.
100%. I played college volleyball just like you. I've never had health issues. I've been very lucky. And this came out of nowhere. And I just feel like if it can happen to me, and like someone else I wanted to talk about is some Olympians that have had it as well.
Mm.
It's if it can happen to us, it can happen to anyone. And it's also disproportionately happens to Black women in America. Mm-hmm. So it's like there's so many layers to preeclampsia, and it's just not talked about because I think people have it, they get it, they move on, luckily if they're lucky enough to survive, and then you kind of forget about it because you got your baby and you're fine.
Right.
But a lot of people do die from it. It's the leading cause of maternal death in America.
Oh my, is it really?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay, so you have a beautiful daughter. I just want to preface this.
Yes.
And Finley.
Yeah.
And how old is Finley?
Finley is almost 8 months. She came 2.5 months early, but she's doing great now. So that's the good news is that she's doing really great, and she's so cute, and I'm obsessed with her.
Well, I mean, as you should be. You and Kevin are so lucky. She's incredible. But like, I don't want to bury the lead. Like you have a beautiful, healthy baby.
Yes.
But the process to get there was surprising and fraught with, self-diagnosis.
Yes.
So do you mind just diving into your story? Like what happened?
Yeah. So I had a really healthy pregnancy all the way leading up to when I got preeclampsia. I just was a little bit morning sick, nothing crazy, felt a little tired, really normal pregnancy stuff. But I started following a labor and delivery nurse on Instagram. I forget her name, but I should plug that because she basically saved my life. She posted something, just like a story picture of like, know the signs of preeclampsia. And this was like right before Christmas time. So I think I was like 27 weeks, which is just starting your third trimester. And it was just like headache, swelling, weight gain, some really generic pregnancy symptoms that can be so easily overlooked. But I happen to have gained 6 pounds in 1 week, which is a lot for even a pregnant person. Just like you're supposed to gain a pound a week-ish, they say, as a guideline. So I was like, that's odd. And I had been tracking it, so I knew. And then I had a headache that wouldn't go away, but not bad, just like a normal headache. I took Tylenol and moved on. And I saw that and I was like, that's really weird. Like those two things kind of triggered my like my alarm bells in my head.
Mhm.
So I got in my car and, well, I sent it to my husband at 3 in the morning because I didn't sleep during my pregnancy.
Of
I said, I
course.
think I have this. And he was like, you're crazy. But in the morning, I drove to Rite Aid because I didn't have a blood pressure cuff. And it
Mhm.
basically tells you to go check your blood pressure when you look it up online. And I drove to Rite Aid because I didn't have one and sat in that little vestibule thing right by the pharmacy that you see usually older people sitting in.
Mhm.
And it was pretty normal. Like it wasn't high. It wasn't for what I thought was high. It was like 130 over like 85.
Mhm.
Looking back, that is like starting to climb up into like where you would be concerned. I'm sure if I was at a doctor's office and I had that reading, they would be like, okay, you're going to come back in 3 days and we'll check you
Yeah.
again. Um, but anyways, that was the week leading up to Christmas. And then I was at my in-laws house for Christmas. On Christmas Eve, they had a blood pressure cuff and I was like, I should just double check again because I kind of have a headache and
Mhm.
not feeling 100%. And I checked it and it was shot up to like 160 over 95 or something like
Oof.
that, which is,
Oof.
for anyone who doesn't know blood pressure, it's like usually you want to be under 120, under 80.
Yeah.
That's like the general guideline. So that's really high. And so I called my OB, but of course it's Christmas Eve. Of
Mhm.
course, there's like no one answering. So I finally got through to like an on call doctor who I've never met before. And he was like, yeah, go to labor and delivery. And you hear that and you're like, that doesn't add up because I'm just starting my third trimester. Like, I'm not delivering anything.
Yeah.
Um, and so I kind of was like second guessing it. And I was like, why don't I wait a few hours and test again? And then I did, and it was higher. And I was like, okay, we should probably go in and just like get a prescription for high blood pressure medicine and go home and enjoy our Christmas.
Was this the, sorry, just to interrupt for one
Yeah.
quick second. Was this the doctor's office that where you called and you talked to the receptionist who wouldn't let you talk to the doctor and
No,
and the receptionist told you to go to labor and delivery?
yeah, I missed that part. When I first went to the Rite Aid, after that I had called my OB in LA and I said I have high blood pressure, I think, and these symptoms, and they were like, "Yeah, go to labor and delivery." And again, I was like, "Why am I going there? Can't I come see you and you check me out?" And
Right.
I don't want to be admitted to labor and delivery at 27 weeks. It doesn't make sense. I just need a prescription. Like, help me fix this problem so I can move on and enjoy my holidays.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
exactly.
I basically was shooed away from my OB, which is unfortunate, and was kind of another piece of this puzzle of like not being really seen or heard
Mhm.
and expressing concern over this really severe disorder, disease, or whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure what it technically is.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the beginning part of my
Mhm.
self-diagnosis.
Okay. So Christmas Eve comes, you're up at your in-laws.
Yeah, and then we went to the hospital up in San Luis Obispo, which was amazing, Sierra Vista. And I get there, and the nurse checked my blood pressure and basically admitted me right away. It was so high. It was, I think, I wish Kevin was here, but I think it was 175 over like 100, which is
So it
like,
kept climbing that day. Like it
it
was
kept climbing that day.
significant.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Um, and she kind of got mad at me. She was kind of like, "Why are you just coming here now? You've known you had high blood pressure all day. Like you could have had a stroke." Like she was like, she was pissed, and I was like, "Why are you pissed at me? Like I'm pissed that I don't know about this. You know, like why?"
Mhm.
I figured this out on my own, and I mean, she was doing it out of like love and care because it
Of
could have
course.
been way worse. But and I ended up having that nurse again, and she was amazing. But yeah, it was like really jarring. To feel like I could have something really bad could have happened.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um,
So what happened after? So she's your nurse there. Was
yeah.
there anything that they could do about it at that point in time, or what happened after that?
So the worst part of this whole admission night was we got admitted, and there was only one doctor on call because again it's Christmas Eve, and he comes in and he's pretty stereotypical older white male
Mhm.
doctor, OB, and he just kind of rushes in, does a quick ultrasound, which, as you know, like is kind of, and it's very,
Yeah.
what's the right word? Like they're all up in there, and
Yeah. It's invasive.
it's
It's
invasive.
invasive.
Yeah, that it's
Yeah.
just like you're vulnerable.
Of course.
He goes, "Oh, good thing the head's down because you could deliver tomorrow."
Huh.
And I was like, "I'm
What?
28 weeks. Like I am just starting my third trimester. What are you talking about?" And me and Kevin were like literally shocked, like no reaction, just like what? He's like, yeah, you can deliver tomorrow, or in best cases, week 37, but you're not leaving here.
Okay. Wait. I just want to pause there for a second, like, because I don't want to gloss over that. If I
Yeah.
think about the journey to get there,
Hmm.
of you see this, and you need to find this girl on Instagram so we can like
Yeah.
say thank you to her.
Yes.
But if you so you see this thing on Instagram like a few weeks prior. You're like, that's interesting. Keep it in the back of my head. Like clearly there was a reason you were meant to see that.
Yeah.
You have a headache that doesn't really go away. You're feeling a little bit like you had some unusual weight gain.
Mm-hmm.
You go to Rite Aid with the old people and you check it, which like, again, I had no idea that that was a thing there, but you see it and it makes sense. And thank God that that's a free service.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're doing it yourself.
Yeah.
And then you're not feeling great because, again, thank God you know your body. And
Yeah.
this is such an important thing for women to pay attention to the signs of your own body and your own
Yes.
intuition. Because if you don't, obviously the results can be disastrous. But you've not had any education on any of this. You've done
No.
all your own question asking and being turned away,
Yeah.
essentially. And then you get to, Sierra Vista. You have a not great doctor with not great bedside manner. And all of a sudden he's telling you, out of nowhere, that you could deliver your daughter prematurely at 28 weeks. So you've gone from self-education to just kidding, you're going to have a premature child.
Yeah, it was truly shocking. Like you were asking me yesterday, like how did you guys feel? Were you like, and I was just like, we were literally shocked.
Yeah,
No, we didn't talk. We were just like, what's going on? Like
right.
your head's down. Like I'm gonna have to push this baby out. Like what do you?
What are you
I
talking about?
haven't even had my baby shower yet. Like I'm not even. I need to go home and have my Christmas dinner.
Right. Literally, you were coming to get a prescription and go home and have dinner. Everyone's waiting for you back at the house.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Um, yeah, and so basically what happened after that is anyone who does have preeclampsia, it's like there's two categories. There's preeclampsia and then severe preeclampsia.
Mm-hmm.
My numbers were so high that immediately qualified me as
Mm-hmm.
severe. And that means you're not going home. Like they're not going to discharge you because you're at such high risk of stroke or heart attack. So what they do, the first thing they do is they put you on magnesium, which is a 2-day IV. It just basically makes you feel like shit. It's like a muscle relaxer, so it also would be given to someone who has preterm labor.
Mm.
I was having Braxton Hicks. I don't think they were real contractions, but it was like a 2-day thing, and it makes you feel sick. It's not fun.
Yeah.
So that was my intro to being admitted to the hospital on Christmas Eve.
So who got in touch with your family? Was it Kevin? Like what happened as you're being admitted? Because clearly your mindset has to shift real fast from I came here to just get checked out because I wasn't feeling great. I was hoping they'd send me home the prescription. They're going to warm up Christmas dinner for me. To all of a sudden you're not leaving.
Yeah.
And we also you're at severe preeclampsia risk, which is another like terrifying piece of news when you don't really understand it.
Yeah.
Who got in touch with your family? Like, how did they kind of think about patient advocacy, which your sister-in-law, Kelly, was such an amazing guest for the patient advocacy and caregiver episode. But like, what happened? I just want to take a break and talk about that. Like, who rallied that whole situation?
Yeah. So my husband, Kevin, was my advocate the whole time. He was amazing. Like he really kept me calm because I was just like obviously freaking out the whole time.
Sure.
But he was the main communicator to all of our family because I really couldn't talk on the phone throughout my hospital stay. Like, and that was unfortunate too because getting emotional would spike my blood pressure. All the alarms would go off. They would come in, give me IV medication. And so I really just like had to kind of stay zen and like almost like hypnotize myself to like just stay focused and like just stay pregnant. Basically, they wanted me to last as long as I could and keep the blood pressure at bay. But he slept on this little tiny cot next to me every single night. The room was tiny, 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 like literally no room for us. We're big humans. Mm-hmm. We had a great view, which was nice, but it was like, it was terrible. And they wake you up throughout the night and he would, as I was sleeping, my blood pressure thing would go off and it has sound. So he would lay next to me, but film the screen to see what it said without like turning on the lights and getting up. So you could see what the blood pressure was to know like how the night was going to go because spoiler alert, it didn't go well most nights and it was high all the time. So he was just always monitoring and making sure that I was okay, keeping me calm, informing everyone, like being the messenger, which usually like in our relationship, I'm more of the communicator for everyone or for us. So I think it was a really big undertaking for him, but he did a great job and just kept me as happy as possible.
I was going to ask, like, how do you stay in a mindset? Cause you were there for 3 weeks, you said, before you were able to come back to LA.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and did you get close? I mean, you were in a hospital gown, I suppose, the whole time. So you don't really need a lot of things.
No, I got to wear my clothes because they weren't yeah, I wasn't in labor, so they weren't, doing cervix checks and stuff. So it was just like I was just there with high blood pressure, and it was the weirdest thing because I didn't necessarily feel sick.
Right.
I was like, I can go home, like I can do this at home, but I really couldn't. I know that now. Um, but I did get a therapist a few days in because I had a really bad day, and I was just like, because they tell you like you could be here until 37 weeks, or eventually it turned to 34 weeks because it had been getting so bad. Um, so even that would have been a month in the hospital, or a month and a half, I think,
Oh my
all in.
gosh.
So yeah, I ended up being there for 3 weeks. Got a therapist, which was amazing, just to
Hmm.
talk to someone that like could just listen and
Yeah.
unbiased opinions. But yeah, I had tons of visitors. My family came, and
Yeah.
Kevin's family came, friends came, got so many care packages, and people went above and beyond. Like it was crazy. So
I
yeah,
mean, that's the thing about when something like this happens. It's like people rally.
yeah.
Were you surprised by any of the people that came to support you?
Um, no, I have great friends.
That's okay, amazing, like
Yeah.
so incredible. So, at what point in time are you able to get back to LA?
So I never left Sierra Vista. I mean, I did eventually, obviously, but I delivered there at 30
Mhm.
weeks, 30 and 3, I think it was.
Wow.
So eventually the blood pressure got so high. And we had talked about trying to leave, trying to get a medical transport to LA, our hospital here. But they just said, like, it's like $20,000.
Oh,
And at that point, like, I knew all the nurses, I knew all the doctors, and everyone besides that first doctor that first night was amazing. Like, and the
mm,
NICU doctors were like phenomenal. So we were comfortable, and we obviously
yeah.
had Kevin's family there. So we eventually decided like we're not gonna try and leave. So I was there like just under 3 weeks, and then eventually the blood pressure. It's just this game of like how high can we, or how
Mhm.
long can we keep the blood pressure under control? Also monitoring the baby, because one thing I didn't mention in the very beginning about preeclampsia is it's the connection between the placenta and the mother that
Oh,
starts to decay with the high blood pressure. So eventually the
oh,
baby will not get the nutrients that it needs, and it will eventually like either you know self go you'll either go into labor or the mom dies,
yeah,
basically. So
right. Oh my
um,
God.
it's just like this game that, and I kept asking them. They hated that I asked this question, like, how much longer do we think I have? And
Mhm.
they just don't know. They don't know how long they can keep your blood pressure down. I basically maxed out all the drugs that they could give me that are safe for pregnant people.
Mhm.
Um, since I was there for so long, I was on blood thinners to prevent blood clots,
Mhm.
which was another concern because my mom had a blood clot with me, and was in the hospital for a long time. So that was like another layer to this whole thing, is trying not to
Mhm.
get a blood clot. Um, so yeah, eventually it got so high they couldn't give me any more drugs, and they had to deliver. It was on January 8th, so yeah, just under 3 weeks, and it wasn't an emergency because I had, like I kind of told you yesterday, I had we had been through so much in that process. Like I couldn't handle an emergency, like rush her back, get her under. I couldn't handle that. So I told them, I was like, if the writing's on the wall that my blood
Mhm.
pressure's out of control, let's just deliver the baby. And
Mhm.
the one day that could make or break my health,
Mhm.
isn't worth the one day in the NICU, the one extra day in the
Yes.
NICU, which is, I told you yesterday, kind of felt selfish, but in hindsight, it's not. It's just keeping everyone alive. Um,
Absolutely. And healthy and able to be a parent, and
yes.
able to be a human and a wife and try to minimize as much disaster as possible. And that's amazing that you advocated for yourself in that and had the foresight to be like, I don't, this is stressful enough
Yeah.
trying to keep my blood pressure down with all this medication, and then obviously when you sit up or you stand up or you walk, it spikes.
Yeah.
And there's so many, like, there's hardly anything you can do. I don't know if people know that, but sometimes when you sit
Yeah.
up out of bed, you get lightheaded. It's because your blood pressure spikes. Like,
Yeah.
you were in the most severe case of that ever. So it makes
Mhm.
perfect sense to be like, I don't want a disaster at the end of this.
No.
Like, let's just make this as smooth as possible. This is already hard enough.
Yeah. So exactly, and that's exactly what I wanted, and that's how it worked out, which is great. So yeah, it got out of control. They called Kevin. And I pushed Kevin to keep doing normal things to get out of the hospital, because again, wasn't sick. I didn't need like emotional support at all times. So I
Mhm.
was like, go golf, go get out, do whatever, go see your family. So he was actually on the golf course when I called him to tell him it was baby time, and he said he stole a golf cart and drove to his car. And I didn't tell you this yesterday. And yeah, literally stole a golf cart from an old guy. and drove in record time to the hospital.
He carjacked him.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? Listen, you got to do what you got to do. In the movie of this, I don't know who would play Kevin, but it's a good one. It's a
It'd
good
be really
move.
entertaining.
Yes.
Yeah. So then he got there, and it was like hurry back kind of thing, but it was again not an emergency, and the surgery itself was not what I expected. I don't know why I thought a C-section would be kind of like a tame, nice environment, very Grey's Anatomy-esque, calm, like slice her open, pull the baby out, sew her
Yeah.
back up. But it was kind of more involved and a lot longer of a process. They put me on a operating table, leaned me back so my feet were at the top and my head was
Mhm.
down, which
Interesting.
was incredibly uncomfortable, as no
Yeah.
one wants their head down. And my arms were out like this and like
Like,
kind
oh,
of,
like a cross almost.
yeah. So I had
Right.
my blood pressure cuff and my IV, and
Mhm.
there was just tons of people in the room. And when they first brought me back, they were like, "What kind of music do you want to listen to?" And I was like, "I don't know. I don't care at all." And they're like, "Just what genre?" And I was like, "Rock." And they started playing AC/DC.
Okay. Perfect. Super relaxing.
Not
Great
really what I
music.
was thinking, but
Yeah.
whatever.
Did
Um,
anyone, and no one prepped you for what was to happen in the C-section either?
I asked, and they said, it could take, usually the baby comes out within the first 5 to 10 minutes. So I
Mhm.
expected that to happen quickly. And then they said usually it takes an hour to sew everything back up.
Mhm.
So, like, all in all, an hour and a half max,
Mhm.
which is what happened. But, and I don't know why, but Finley didn't come out for, I want to say, like, at least 15 to 20 minutes. So that, I think, heightened my anxiety of like what's going on.
Of
There was
course.
also a lot of like pushing, a lot of pressure. It felt very uncomfortable. It didn't hurt, but very, very uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And a lot of sounds like suction. It sounded like probably for blood,
Yeah.
and lots of people. And, my blood pressure cuff was going off every, I think, 30 seconds. I
Oh
don't know
my
if that's
God.
an exact, I don't know if it was either 30 seconds or every 2 minutes. I don't know, but it felt like it was constantly going off, which is just stressful because
Yeah.
I had been having it go off for, the past 3 weeks
Yeah.
at
And
regular
it's not
intervals.
comfortable either. Like the
No,
blood
your
pressure
arm getting
cuff is not
squeezed.
comfortable. Yeah, and
No.
so you had that all the time for
Yeah.
3 weeks, and then
Yeah.
alarm bells, and
Yeah.
then nonstop alarm bells, obviously during the C-section for obvious
Yeah.
reasons.
Yep, exactly. So it was just uncomfortable at all times. And then, of course, my lovely husband turned to the NICU nurse and was like, "Hey, can I have some water?" And I'm like, looking at him, "Are you are you okay?" And he started getting tunnel vision and
Oh
was
God.
about to faint. So the NICU nurse was like, "No, I'm about to grab the baby, do my job." So he was like, "Can someone get this guy some orange juice?" And so they brought him orange juice, and Kevin said it was the best drink he's ever had in his whole life, and it
Yeah.
saved him immediately from fainting. But
Oh my God.
yeah,
I
it
mean,
was
but
just,
also, as an aside, like again, we've talked about this. Like I know men are supposed to be brave and women are brave and all of it. Like, no one needs to see that. Like, he should be
yeah,
down by your head. I
yeah,
mean, and maybe some people do want to, but like, he's witnessing major surgery and like
yeah.
intestines out. I mean, I had a vaginal birth, so mine was not C-section, but from what I
Still,
understand from friends, like it's it's a lot, and like
yeah,
there's layers they have to cut through, and then there's
yeah,
like intestines they have to take out, and then they finally
yeah.
get to the baby, and it's like it's not a here you go.
No,
Like,
it's not
even
a
the
clean,
smallest
fun, cute process. It's very invasive and very bloody, and
right.
yeah, and it's intense. There was like a screen up with a little
Mhm.
window, so like I couldn't see out, but he could see, and he was
Mm,
with my at my head, um, but I think he still was looking a little bit just to check it out because
sure.
I was kind of freaking out. I think he would say like I was stressing him out,
Yeah.
and because I was like, "What's going on? Why do I feel things? I don't want to feel
Mhm.
anything.
Oh,
I don't want to move."
I
Just
would not do well. I need to know like exactly what's going on at all times. Like
yeah,
I'm an information need to know person, and I would
yeah.
be like someone needs to literally like take me through step by step exactly what you're going to do when, and when you're doing it, I need you to tell me what's happening. Like
So
I am
now I'm
that
doing
person.
this. This is, you're gonna feel this,
Yes.
and I don't know, and I wish I asked more questions afterwards. But the doctor who delivered me, who I love, he was amazing. He did apologize and said like, "I know you were in a lot of discomfort and you shouldn't have been." So I don't know if that means the anesthesiologist didn't give me enough, or if
Oh,
it was he wasn't communicating with me enough. I'm not sure what he meant by that, but it was nice to hear that he like acknowledged it wasn't me just kind of being annoying, crazy
Yeah.
mom patient. That
Yeah.
something was off-ish with me. But
Wow.
they prepped us and they said like when the baby comes, and again we didn't know the gender, so that was kind of like a nice fun
Oh.
part of this whole story. So they were like, when baby comes, we're gonna, you might not hear it cry, which every parent knows is like this a good sign to hear. You want to hear baby cry, that means they're
Mhm.
breathing. They're like, you might not hear the baby cry, and we might not be able to give you the baby and like put him or her on your chest
Mhm.
because we might need to take him back. Don't worry, but like that's very possible with a 30 weeker. So the good news is we did hear her cry pretty immediately, and then they were able to like bring her over and put her on my chest, and we found out she was a girl. So that
Oh,
was that was really nice.
this is the best moment ever.
Yeah.
It's like this most surreal moment of all of these things. You're like, and then sometimes it's just like nothing else matters in that second. It's a
Yeah.
weird bubble
It
you're in.
they eventually did give me some like maybe Xanax or some kind of relaxing because I was I think a little bit hysterical.
Yeah.
And so when that when they put her on me, I think I was just a little bit out of it. And it did take me a while. It did take me a while to like bond with her like throughout the NICU experience because I couldn't hold her for like a week or so. So
Oh
it was
gosh.
very like it was a weird feeling. But looking back, I don't feel bad about it. It just was like, oh, that's
Sure.
mine. Okay, am I good? Am I sewed up? Like what's? It was just chaotic, I would say. But it
I
was
feel is it like, because again, when you get pregnant, you expect based on the Grey's Anatomy and the way that people just describe it and friends, and it's like until you go through it, you don't actually know.
yeah,
But like your experience was cut so short, and it was
yeah,
so traumatic and so chaotic, and so like again like self-diagnosis, and then wild chaos throughout
yeah.
3 weeks of like what's going on. Or am I going to deliver? Am I not? Am I going
Mhm.
to, like you said earlier, very astutely, like just stay pregnant. But
Yeah.
then to then have your child be right there. And it's like, well, this is mine, but I can't hold you. And like, what is happening? Like, did it feel surreal?
Yeah, it felt surreal. They're like, yeah, she's they came over and they said she's I think 16 inches long and 2.11 pounds and or 2 pounds 11 ounces. And I was like, 2 pounds? They had on you get ultrasounds throughout your pregnancy and they tell you how big they think the baby is, and all leading up to that they were like, yeah, 3.5 pounds. Like you hear 2 pounds, you're like, that is not right. Like that
No.
is just wrong. And we did find out afterwards, or Kevin heard during the surgery after she came out, that my placenta was severely damaged. So
Wow.
it happened at the right time, which was good to hear because
Mhm.
you don't want to hear like, oh yeah, your placenta was healthy, you could have kept her in,
No.
but she wasn't gonna be getting the nutrients she needed either. So it was like it happened at the right time, which was good.
I mean, that's fantastic. So two questions. After you give birth and Finley's out of you, so what happens with your blood pressure then? Like, does it go immediately down and you're back to normal? And then also, you have to worry about that. Like, oh, I have to take care of myself. What's this preeclampsia situation? But then also with Finley being 2 pounds, 11 ounces, like again, like that's very tiny and 30
Yeah.
weeks is very early. Did you have double stress about yourself and then obviously stress about like her own survival?
Yeah. So about the preeclampsia and the blood pressure. So they had warned me previously, they're like, your blood pressure is so severe. We're concerned you might have this like a chronic condition. Like you might have blood pressure that's this high, even when you're not pregnant. So that was something in the back of my mind. But in theory, normal preeclampsia, once the placenta's out, that
Mhm.
is typically the issue that causes the high blood pressure. So once it's out, usually for most patients, it goes back down, like, within the next week or so,
Mhm.
even shorter than that, I think. Um, but since they had said that to me, I was kind of prepared to be chronically have high blood pressure. But I would say, I was discharged 3 or 4 days after I delivered, which is pretty normal for a C-section. So that was like a good sign. And then I had weekly checks with my OB and I had to check my blood pressure at home. But I was on pretty high dosage of nifedipine, which is a procardia. It's like it's extended release blood pressure medication. And I was
Mhm.
on the highest dosage of that
Wow.
for, I think, a month afterwards, which is
Okay.
a long time for, like, I think it's longer than most people would be on it.
Yeah.
Um, but eventually I just was able to, like, it slowly started to come down, and you have to
Good.
be careful because you can't take that high of medication when your blood pressure is normal, because then it'll go too low and then you could
Oh,
bottom out. So it's like you have
right.
to play this game of like keeping it in this like good zone, and it's really hard
Mhm.
with an extended release medication to like not
Yeah.
go too low.
I didn't even think about that. How often were you checking your blood pressure once like on this
Um,
medication?
I was probably checking it too much.
Mhm.
I really was. I had a huge fear of having to go back to the hospital, so I was like, I was checking it probably every few hours,
Okay.
and eventually I had to call my doctor, and I was like, it's not going down. I need like more medication. And he was like, you sound like you're kind of having a panic attack. That's not good. So we're going to give you antidepressants because he
Mm-hmm.
saw signs of uh, PPD, postpartum depression,
Yeah.
and he prescribed another blood pressure medication. So once I got both of those, I felt so much better,
Good.
um, all around. So I think once I had those, it was just like, okay, I'm not going back to the hospital. I was afraid to call him because I was afraid he was going to be like, you need to come back.
Yeah.
Um, and then once I got all those, I felt so much better. And then it slowly went down after that.
That's amazing. So what happened with Finley as I'm assuming you stayed in Slow up in
Yeah,
San Luis Obispo, obviously.
exactly. Yeah, we stayed in Slow at Kevin's parents' house, which thank God they're amazing, and they like supported us throughout the whole thing with letting us stay there. Um, but we went to the NICU every day. I think we only took one day off. She was in the NICU for 2.5 months, I think. Um, yeah, so she was born January 8th, and we were discharged March 12th, so about 2 months.
Wow.
I mean, the NICU doctor, Dr. Van Scoy, was like our favorite person of all time. Like I would love to go. I'm going to send this to him and would love to hang out with him. He's so cool. But he said she wrote the textbook on being a 30 weeker. So she did
Wow.
everything as expected. Like all the ups and the downs were not planned, as expected. She did have some bad days, some good days. But our main concern for her was her lungs, because that's what develops last
Yeah.
apparently in babies. So she had to be on like breathing machines basically until she was discharged,
Hmm.
which is hard because again, you can't really hold. It's hard to hold babies when they have a mask on with
Yeah.
tubes and wires and stuff. So um, yeah, it was. We didn't get a hold her for I think a month, or sorry, a week. And once we did, it was like they had to like gently place her on us. They really didn't want anyone touching her. We had to
Yeah.
hold her for at least an hour 'cause they're supposed to be in the womb. They're not supposed to be touched. They're not supposed to
Sure.
feel sensations and like noises and beeps. And they're just put into this like very foreign environment. So
Hmm.
that we try to disturb her at least we could.
Yeah. What was your mindset like knowing that so you were out, you're trying to
Mhm.
manage your blood pressure with multiple medication. Thank
Yeah.
goodness like the doctor noticed the signs of PPD because that is a whole nother
Mm-hmm.
podcast episode that I actually am going to do.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have this amazing little baby who's a 30 weeker and you basically have to turn your attention to this little fighter,
Yeah.
right? Like, what was your mindset like knowing that to go, okay, you're out of the hospital, but then you have to go in and visit her and
Yeah.
then also try to like live life because everyone else is living life. It's just
Yeah.
like the
Well,
layers of this are
it
wild.
was it was so weird because so basically what I did was I made my job pumping milk and bringing
Mm.
it to her. Like that was what
Mhm.
I because I was able to. I mean, I was on maternity leave after that, even though
Yeah,
I didn't have my baby, which felt very strange also.
sure.
But I was like, the only thing I can do is give her milk. So I just became
Mhm.
a pumping machine, and I
Yep.
just stuck to my like really regimented pumping schedule. And we had to like you have to date each pump and
Mhm.
timestamp it, and because they need to give her the milk in order, because apparently when
Mm.
you give birth, like the milk that you give them has different things at different times, so it
Mm.
needs to be in order. You can't just like or you can just give them anything, but it's better for them to get those nutrients like they would be getting it if it was a
Yeah.
normal birth.
Interesting.
So it was very like we had to sanitize everything. I think you're supposed to anyways, but they were very very concerned with like infection and
Sure.
everything like that. So we basically had to full on sanitize after each pump, which anyone who's had to pump or done bottles, it's just the worst.
The
Like
worst.
nobody wants to all these little contraptions and pieces. So that like pumping and cleaning was like a full time job.
Hmm.
Obviously, thankfully, I had a ton of help with Kevin's parents and Kevin, and my mom came out for a long time, so we had a ton of help. But
Hmm.
yeah, I just made it my job, and so we went every day. Um, held her when we could, and if we just got to see there, like be there and like pet her, then that was good enough too.
What was it like leaving her each time?
It was, it sounds weird to say, but it was nice to leave because the NICU was next to my hospital room. So like every time I got to the hospital, I would walk past my room
Yeah.
and see the old nurses, which I loved, and it was good to see them. But it was like, it was Groundhog's Day, and
Hmm.
I was just excited to get home. It was nice to be there,
Yeah.
but like the bells, the whistles, all of the sounds. It was very warm, the NICU, because they can't have it be cold. Obviously,
Sure.
these babies should be in your womb.
Right.
Um, it was hot and loud and just overstimulating in
Mhm.
the worst way possible. So I was in and out. I was like, I want to be there, see
Yeah.
her, give the milk, get home, pump, start the
Yeah.
process over again.
So it definitely sounds like you have triggers and PTSD from the experience there. And then you didn't want to be
Probably.
triggered each time going
Yeah.
back in.
Every day.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So she was discharged in March. When was her due date?
Her due date was St. Patrick's Day, so March 17th.
Oh my gosh. And when was she
And
discharged in March?
yeah, she was discharged a few days before, like March 12th, I think.
Wow. That is that. And she's doing amazing now.
Yeah, she's doing amazing now. And one of the good things about, well, it's not good. One of the nice things that the state provides to extreme preemies is access to like an infant progress clinic, is what they call it. So we actually have, it's not until they turn like 9 months, I think. So ours is in September, and
Mm.
they just go and they do a full eval. They have all the different doctors, like physical therapists, respiratory people. They just do a complete analysis of her to make sure she's progressing and stuff. So as of as of today, she's doing amazing. No concerns. Has gotten all her vaccinations, hitting all of her milestones, and is smiling and happy and sleeps through the night. So she's doing great. But once we get that appointment out of the way, I think we'll feel like really good about her.
Yeah.
But the one thing is, she's really, I don't know if immunocompromised is the right word,
Mm.
but she's at very high risk for being rehospitalized for COVID, RSV, colds, like anything
Right.
respiratory. So they basically told us we can't go to daycare, which is, if you live in LA,
Yeah.
or pretty much anywhere, daycare is expensive, but cheaper than a nanny. So they
Yeah.
basically told us you have to get a nanny or stay home with her, which is a really tough choice to make. Have to make like a monetary decision on based on that.
Of
But
course.
so thankfully, we actually found a nanny that we could share with our niece next door. Who I don't think I've mentioned, but we have a niece that's 2 months younger than her, so we do a nanny share, and it worked out perfectly. But we kind of have to keep her away from other kids that are in daycare, and we know
Yeah.
how sick kids can get, and it's so sad. But yeah,
Of
we have to
course.
take the extra layer of caution with her.
Yeah. I mean, it's the breeding ground. The like every my brother's child has hand, foot, and mouth right now.
It's just so sad. I mean, I do think it builds their immune system, obviously. So when they're
Sure.
older, they're gonna have great immune systems, and she might not. But I'd rather have a sick toddler in 2 or 3 years than, yeah,
Absolutely. It's worth it. It's worth it
yeah,
right now. So, do you have any concern about your blood pressure now? Is it completely normal? And are you at any risk should you decide to get pregnant again at some point in time to have a second child? Like, what does that look like?
yeah. So I have completely normal blood pressure now, which is
Mhm.
great. Every appointment I've had a ton of follow ups post op and just like regular OB checks. Blood pressure's been completely fine, which is so nice that I don't have chronic blood pressure issues.
Yes.
But the answer is yes. I'm at very high risk for preeclampsia since it was in the severe category, and I'm
Mhm.
at an I think even higher risk of it happening earlier in any future pregnancies, which is the unfortunate part of this because if we wanted to have another kid, it's weighing the risk of me being healthy
Right.
and potentially having a baby even earlier. And for anyone that has had a preemie, like baby should at the earliest come at 37 weeks. That's
Mhm.
full term, but you want a 40 weeker. Like that's the goal. So having a baby at 30 weeks is not ideal. But having a baby earlier than that, like there's so many milestones that babies hit when they develop in the womb that happen later on, and it really puts them at risk, like survival risk.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's a hard thing, and I actually just met with a high risk OB, also called a perinatologist, also called a MFM. There's like three
Mhm.
names for them, but I met with an amazing perinatologist yesterday, and she basically said there's a 35% chance that it happens again and earlier. So yeah, it's a high percentage. So we have to weigh the risks. But there is some interesting things that came out of that meeting, and that's that there are some other conditions that could be underlying that are
Hmm.
like clotting disorders, basically, that are known to cause preeclampsia.
Interesting.
So she's doing a full panel of blood work for me, which I did yesterday. So we'll see if I have any of those, because
Yeah.
I think some of them, if I do, obviously it's not ideal to have a clotting disorder, but there's things you can take, blood thinners, of course, that could help if I were to want to get pregnant again, lower the chances more than that. So
Hmm. I mean,
it's kind of
at least,
evolving. Like, I'm not sure.
yeah. Yeah, more answers are better, but it's
Yeah.
so interesting to know. I'm just going to say, because I'm so glad that you had that appointment,
Yeah.
to really figure out like what the heck happened to you and like
Yeah.
why. I think it's just so interesting to think that there's such a communication breakdown overall. Like,
Yeah.
you were mentioning when we chatted earlier that like at the very least at 20 weeks, if you get to 20 weeks and like
Hmm.
hopefully most women do, and you're very excited, you have that very like significant ultrasound where they check everything,
Yeah.
knowing that preeclampsia could come a few weeks later or as early as a few weeks later. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm like, my doctor never said a word to me about it
Yes.
ever. And I
Yeah.
had heard of it, but like I didn't really know. And I knew it's something to do with
Yeah.
high blood pressure, but I was very lucky that I didn't have it.
Yeah.
But like, it should be standard practice to
Yeah.
not scare the shit out of somebody, but to say, hey, FYI, should you exhibit some of the following symptoms, just give us a call. You're
Yeah.
probably gonna be fine. Just want
Yeah.
to let you know.
Yeah, just be over communicative, and like that's what makes me angry. It's like I got lucky. Like I shouldn't have known about preeclampsia because no one told me. No one
Right.
told me, "Hey, this is what to look out for." I saw it on Instagram. That is so wrong, and that's what I'm pissed about, because I got lucky and people don't have the information and people are at higher risk than I was. So like it's such an issue on so many levels, and that goes back to the black women having more of a chance of
Mhm.
having it, and like literally Olympians dying. It's so crazy to me that that can happen. So yeah, I've been like kind of vocal on my social media about it, because I just want my friends to know about it. Like
Mhm.
anyone that's newly pregnant, I'm like, hey, go buy a blood pressure cuff, please. I'll buy it for you. Like just have it and check it,
Yeah.
after your 20-week scan. But
Have you made an impact? I mean, first of all, I'm so happy that you've started to talk about this because it's so important for people, particularly first-time moms who just don't know.
yeah,
And depending on the quality of their OB, they might not be not an amazing OB, but like again, never mentioned it to me.
great.
But has your story impacted others who ended up having preeclampsia, or like have you helped anybody with that?
Yeah, it's actually funny enough that my sister-in-law, who I just mentioned, lives next door. We were pregnant at the same time,
Mhm.
and after my situation, she bought a blood pressure cuff and started checking, and lo and behold, at like 35 weeks, it started to go up, and she was able to like go into the doctor, get monitored. She was able to like just take some medication, keep it
Mhm.
at bay until 38 weeks, and then my niece came then, and she's doing great, and they're both doing great now. But she literally had it, and it's so crazy that both of us had it at the same time. Um, so yeah, she had it.
And she wouldn't have known had you not had your situation because did her OB not say a word to her either?
We had the same OB.
You had the same. Oh my God.
Yeah,
Oh, so obviously you won't have that OB next time.
I don't have that OB anymore. No, and
No.
one of the great things is like it's really hard to be an advocate for yourself and like kind of find the right doctors for you. It
Yeah.
sucks, and it's a lot of research, and it's just weird. You don't like shouldn't have to like shop around for doctors, but thankfully through me posting about it, I had another friend that had preeclampsia. She's very
Hmm.
similar to me, like no other health issues, delivered at 32 weeks.
Wow.
She is in my area, and she recommended her doctor, and I met with her, and Kevin and I both loved her. So she's now working with the high risk OB that I just met with yesterday, and they're going to like
Hmm.
collaborate, and like that's what everyone should get.
Hmm.
Doctors talking to each other, sharing information, and making sure that the whole picture is being seen. Because, like, and I don't know if I can't remember if I told you this or if I already said this. But my mom had a blood clot,
Yeah.
so should I have been checked for blood clotting disorders before anything I even got to 20 weeks? Like, should people have been more concerned? I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but my doctor never said anything.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing is it's first of all, I'm so happy you're okay. I was so shocked when I saw, because it just, Sharon and I have known each other for a million years and
Yes.
used to work together
Yes.
and love you the most. Like, but when I saw this happening on Instagram, I was like,
Mhm.
it's one of those things where you're kind of like, wait, what with
Yeah.
her? Because she's so healthy. Like,
Yeah.
this is crazy. I don't understand. And I'm so happy that you're okay, and B, that Finley's okay, and that your niece is okay, but just also that you're starting to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because again, like, you're 32, you're a
Yeah.
first time mom,
Yeah.
and you shouldn't have had that stress or
Yeah.
this like health scare
Yeah.
during this first time pregnancy.
Yeah. I I totally agree, and I don't want it to happen to other people. And but you, even if you do have it, like, you can't stop it, which is why I want more research to go out about it. Like, no, the high risk OB whose job is to research this, she's like, there's not enough research that I can't tell you if this will happen again. I can't tell you why it happened. They don't know
Right.
why the placenta has, causes high blood pressure. They don't know. They just know it needs to come out, and so they deliver you, and then everyone moves on.
Right. I
It's
mean,
just
this
like,
just, I mean,
it's
again, a
a
whole
women's
different.
issue that people overlook, and it's deadly. It's shocking.
Yeah. I mean, and again, like, just another reason why there needs to be so much more funding for women, research into women's health and fertility and all of it,
Yeah.
all of it. And there's just not. What would you say? Because I like to ask this at the end each
Mhm.
time. So since it's obviously called What Nobody Tells Us, like, thinking about your experience, and you've already shared so many amazing tips, like, so thank you for that.
Mhm.
What are the kind of the walking away, what no one tells you about preeclampsia that you want people to know?
No one tells you about it, period. But
Yeah.
it is just, it's such a silent killer disease that I just wish people could know it existed. I wish that, everyone hears about it, but no one looks it up, because it's never going to happen to you, but it can. And I do think it's on the rise, and I don't know why. And I wish that people could, there was more research behind it, and that, you know, again, I keep bringing this up, but the Black women in America are just suffering from it more than
Hmm.
anyone else, and that's not fair. And they're being treated differently. And I just think overall, the healthcare industry needs to shape up and help
Hmm.
women figure out how to avoid what happened to me and to a lot of other women.
That is so beautifully said. Again, your sister-in-law Kelly, when we were talking about patient advocacy, one of the big points that she made early on was about educating yourself as a patient advocate but unfortunately, when you're the patient,
Mm-hmm.
in this case, something that the OBs don't really bring up, and I just don't understand why they don't, but
I know.
to educate yourself on what could happen. So you can even just go in and ask the question, hey, should I be worried about preeclampsia? When could this happen? What are
Mm-hmm.
some of the risk factors? What are some of the signs and the
Yeah.
symptoms? Even if they brush it off, it's like you
Yeah.
want to just be aware.
Yeah. And I will say a few more things I wanted to mention about it. One
Hmm.
of the risk factors for preeclampsia is being a first time mom. So if anyone out there is thinking about it or is pregnant, just ask. It can't hurt. Bring it up. Check your blood pressure after 20 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I never checked my blood pressure when I was pregnant, not even once. Like, my husband just had to check it because he's got certain drugs like that could interact with his chemotherapy, and so we have a blood pressure cuff. But there's something about buying a blood pressure cuff that makes you feel like either very old or just like, this is weird, like, or very sick. But it's just, we're all human beings with blood pressure. So, like, there's nothing weird about, and they're like, they're cheap. They're cheap at CVS or Walgreens or, Rite Aid, whatever it might be.
The other thing I was going to say is no one explained to me when we first went to the doctor, like when we got pregnant, no one explained to me like what to expect, which is so silly to say because there's a book about what to expect. But
Yeah.
there's no like, here's a pamphlet of all the appointments and what's going to happen, and then the risks that could happen after each week.
Mm.
And why you have to go to the doctor so much. Like, they don't tell you. A lot of I questioned, because I had to drive 30 minutes to my OB.
Mhm.
I was like, why am I going? Like, I don't even see the doctor. It's
Mhm.
because they're checking your blood pressure and that they're looking for preeclampsia, but they don't tell you that, which is like helps connect the dots in your own brain. Like, I need to go to the doctor to check this because there's
Yes.
other issues that can happen, but they just make you come and kind of feel like it's frivolous. Like, they're just checking the box for you.
Yeah.
And I do think certain OBs can just kind of be a mill for moms. Like, you go in, they check the box. Most pregnancies are normal. I get that, but
Mhm.
um, I just think that there needs to be more attention to detail and information up front, because it's just so easy to like not understand and not know the science.
Yeah. And then God forbid the worst could happen. So it's
Yeah.
like, again, like you said, it can't hurt. Bring it up,
Yeah.
ask the questions,
Go to your
educate yourself.
appointments.
Most likely nothing's going to happen, but just know it and don't
Yeah.
find it out from Instagram. And be honest to
Yes.
God, thank God for that. Thank God that
Yeah.
you did.
I know. Yeah. I'll find I think her Instagram is like Mackenzie on motherhood. She just posts great informational stuff from like a labor and delivery nurse, but she was the one that I saw online. So
That's crazy. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know
of course.
when I talked to Kelly, she's like, you need, I mean, obviously I knew part of your story. It was like,
Yeah.
we were chatting on Instagram and messaging, but Kelly's like, Sheridan needs to tell her story. She's been starting to be more vocal and more advocacy focused. And I was
Yeah.
like, we need to get this out there.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
No, thank you for having this podcast in general. I think that all the topics you've been talking about are amazing, and I can't wait to hear the rest that are coming out.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I
Thank
think
you.
you guys are just doing the Lord's work.
We're trying our best. Thank you, my dear.
Thank you.
Well, that's it. Another episode of What Nobody Tells Us. I hope you learned something. I hope you felt something. And I hope you feel empowered to go start a conversation with someone about something you might not understand. Lean in. Don't peace out. Thanks so much for spending some time with me today. I love that you did that. And if I can ask, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review my podcast, and share it with as many people as you know it can help, because that's the whole point of this. Let's help people normalize uncomfortable conversations. Let's build community, and let's help people so no one suffers in silence. We don't need to do that anymore. Let's talk about the things that nobody tells us. If you want to follow and reach out and share any ideas that you might have, my gosh, I've gotten so many great ideas from you guys already. Do so on Instagram at What Nobody Tells Us and at Pardon My Crumbs. That's my personal one. Feel free to follow if you want to see pictures of Brian and Tessa and myself. And if you want to shoot me an email, go ahead. Christy@nobodytellsus.com. Until next time, see you later.